Hello, so this is my look at The Division, and this video's 3 or 4 days later than I actually intended because I did the first review of it, and when I went back to it, it was kind of rambling and all over the place. So this one I'm going to try and keep short and concise because I think those are actually the more interesting reviews. Somebody spending half an hour telling you about a game isn't really going to tell you anything more than you could have learned in 5 minutes. So here we go. Review of The Division. The Division doesn't know what kind of game it is. That is its biggest problem. Is it an MMO? Is it a co-op game? Is it a single player? It tries to do all of them, and it doesn't really succeed at doing any of them very well. What The Division does amazingly well is actually create the world. It looks really good. Video in the background is settings on high, because if I set it on ultra, although it will run, and it'll run quite well, it will get some severe frame drops at times below 60 frames a second. So all I did was set it on high and turn the VSync off. Apparently this game runs a lot better if you're not running Windows 10. Something to Windows 10 means this game doesn't run as well as if you're running, say, Windows 8 or Windows 7. Don't know why, I've just read that because I went off to research why I wasn't really getting the frame rate I should be out of an i7 and 16 gig and a 980 Ti. But it seems to be Windows 10 related, or it's the Nvidia drivers on Windows 10. But the game still looks really good even on high. On ultra you can't really tell the difference that much. And it's the best model of a city you will see in a game. Now it does have a few little issues like doors you can't open even though you're armed with grenades and shotguns, but that's what happens in all games. But the actual city modelling is really good. I don't know if it's an accurate model of New York because I've never been there, but it is really good. It feels like a city, and it feels like a city in crisis. But it's also part of the Division's really big problem. It's got a really accurate city, it's got really accurate armours and weapons. Okay, the gadgets are over the top, but that's because it's supposed to be slightly futuristic. But that really clashes with the areas of the game that are a bit of a letdown. So, the gun mechanics, the fact that the enemies are all bullet sponges even though they're wearing sweatshirts. It was obvious in the beta, and it's even more obvious in the game that you're still going through and killing the same enemies over and over again. You go up against the flamers. Well, there's one group of guys who've got flamethrowers with tanks on their back. There's another group of guys who've got shields, and you just see them over and over and over again. Some of the sort of elites are modelled differently, but all the foot soldiers look the same, and they all take tons of bullets to drop. So, how do you reconcile having a realistic setting and a realistic city, but the guns don't act in realistic ways? It kind of clashes. Then you've got the problem of the character, the fact that there isn't one. You create your own character, you go through the character setup thing, which is really limited, and all the characters kind of look the same until you put different hairstyles on them, and even then they still look the same, but you can only see the back of your character's head, so it doesn't really matter. There's just no character involvement. Because it's a third-person shooter, you can see that character on the screen. But in a lot of third-person shooter kind of role-play games, the character you're playing isn't supposed to be you. So something like Shepard out of Mass Effect. There's a character, there's a dialogue, the character's got a story. The Division doesn't have that. You create the character and you're pretty much just a nameless agent in the Division. And your character doesn't interact with anybody. And I mean nobody. You get talked to, but you never talk back. It's another one of these stupid characters that is a mute, apparently. So you get orders, you get radio messages, but you never have an opinion on anything. You never really get a choice on anything. You can choose which of the side missions to do, but the main missions are just, here's your radio message, when you select it, off you go and do it. That's it. You're just ordered around like some kind of dumb gun bunny. The random people you meet on the street talk to each other more than you will ever talk to a character. Even when you're going up to help somebody, you don't go up and say, what do you need? Your character just scans them, randomly runs up and gives them something, and then gets a reward. Well, it just isn't immersive. There's no sense that you're really in the world. You're kind of watching the world, but you're not in it. And it's very similar for the story. the story is kind of happening around you. There'll be a bit of story before you go off and do one of the main missions. You'll do the mission, and then there'll be a bit of story after it. But while you're actually doing the mission, there's no story or involvement. None of the bad guys you're shooting will ever attempt to talk to you or tell you what they're doing. You'll never get the option of, okay, well I might let this guy live and try and recruit him and bring him into the fold rather than kill him and all his friends. There's a definite disconnect between you and your character, but even between your character and what's going on in the world. Let's take the main plot. 2 Division agents land and are trying to build a base. One of them's wounded. She instantly becomes your boss and just tells you what to do. But if that's the case, who are these other Division agents that I keep meeting in the bases and the safe houses? Who are these people running around in the dark zone shooting at each other? They're all appearing to be Division agents, but in the plot, it doesn't actually include anything like that. The plot just says that you and this other agent survived the crash. You must now go out and rebuild the world. So what are all the other people doing running around there? And if everybody else is getting the same mission that they are Division agents going out to save the world, why is there a PvP zone where you kill each other? You're all supposed to be working for the same organisation. But when you go into the dark zone, you can kill each other and become rogue agents. And run around and steal things and then escape with all your loot. But when you go back into the campaign world, they never mention it that you've just shot 10 or 20 Division agents. They just carry on as if nothing's happened. Because there's no connection between that dark zone and the campaign world. And that's what the Division is lacking. Connections. There's no connection between you and your character. There's no real connection between your character and the story. There's no connection between the campaign and the story and the dark zone. I don't see what they were trying to do. It doesn't really work as a single player shooter because all the enemies are bullet sponges. It doesn't work as a co-op game if you're just working together with random people. And the PvP isn't even working as that was intended, because at the moment nobody wants to go into PvP because the penalties far outweigh the rewards. So why would you bother going rogue? And for me, that just means the game doesn't feel very interesting. I've got no involvement in it. After a couple of hours of playing it, I'm just bored. It really just feels like you're going through the motions to get towards the end game, but the end game is apparently just PvP, and that really doesn't interest me. It's not an MMO, so it doesn't give you a sense of ownership and involvement like World of Warcraft does with your character, where you make it and then you build up all your little traits and talents and you try and get all the best gear so you can go raiding with your mates. It doesn't really have the single player feel. So you can't play it like Fallout 4 where you're going through and making decisions and taking sides, because it's pretty linear, even down to the fact that when you get into a mission, all you're pretty much doing is following the diamonds and the lines and shooting the bad guys. The only time the Division works is if you get together with like 4 of your mates, go in and play it all together. But that has its issues as well, because if one of your mates decides to go off and play on their own and out-levels you, then it's a bit of a nightmare when you try and group back together, because the enemies don't really seem to level up properly for groups of different levels. So while it's a great looking game, it's repetitive, it's dull, and it doesn't keep me interested. I was going to do basically a playthrough similar to how I did with Fallout 4, but there's no point. Without consequences and choices, what's the point of playing a game? Because there isn't really a story that I'd be creating. You'd just be watching the Division story. And the Division story isn't really done that well. So would I recommend you go out and buy the Division? No. If you can handle the fact that in single player it's still a bullet sponge game, then buy it when it's on sale and treat it as a single player game. Maybe in the future, when they've done patches and DLCs and worked out what the game is really trying to do, it might be better. But at the moment, it's just a bit of a mishmash of lots of ideas that don't really gel together. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the Division. I know there's much longer, more detailed reviews of the game and exactly what's wrong with it or what's right with it, but these are my condensed opinions on it. Thanks for watching.